The Sportsman's Alliance of Maine welcomes you to Conserving the Maine Outdoors on Legacy 1160 WSKW. Now, here are David and Mike.
Welcome to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with David and Mike. Well, Mike, another week has passed, and we're doing this again.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. I love the hat.
The hours go by. This thing's old, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I love the hat. I've got one at home very similar, except it has the ear flaps.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nice, yeah.
I look like I'm tracking a wascally wabbit when I wear it. But we always start this show out with, I think you want to make a plug first, but I'll get to the stories here in a second.
Well, Conserving the Maine Outdoors with David and Mike is a production of the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine. You can check out our website, sportsmansallianceofmaine.org. We'd love to have you as a member. Some good benefits of being a member. I just saved $90 on a new ice fishing suit, actually, from Cabela's, because they have up to 25% off at Cabela's with your membership. So $90 would get you about, 4 years of memberships there. Yeah. Well, so it actually pays me to be a member of this. The Sportsman's Alliance of Maine pays me to be a member.
Well, you know, if you're doing a lot of Christmas shopping at Cabela's right now, it would pay to be a member of SAM.
It would pay, yeah.
You save a lot of money.
All right.
So we've got a very serious show today. Exciting, but very serious too. And we'll start out like we always do. What did you do last week in the outdoors, Mike?
I did get out hunting. Yep. I went out. I have a special commissioner's permit to use a crossbow because, I can admit this now only because I have the permit. But I used to shoot a compound fine with my arm. You know, I'm missing my left arm. But what happened was I have this shoulder injury where I cannot shoot the compound bow anymore. So I used the hook to get me a permit for the crossbow.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say,
normally
if you didn't add that qualifier in there, I was going to ask you, so if I rob the bank and get away with it, it's okay to admit it a couple of years later?
I hope Judy's not listening to this show.
Jeepers creepers.
The commission might revoke my permit.
All right. So you didn't see anything?
No, it was so loud. It was so nice to get out, though.
Yeah,
but no, the snow and ice was so loud underfoot that those deer heard me coming from miles away, and there was nothing much I could do about it. But it was still definitely worth going, and I was still hunting, so walking slowly.
So I didn't even get a chance to get out and do anything. I did talk a lot with my staff. We have a young lady in our office, Ashley, who wants to, I think, get into hunting. We talked about doing a little bit of gray squirrel hunting, chasing some small game and getting her used to that. But
nice. Every
time that Becky and I cook some venison, she comes out and samples it, and I think she's interested now in maybe getting some wild game. I think she likes it. But anyway, the coolest thing that I did this week was, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife called and said, we've got some broodstock left in our hatchery. Would you like them to stick them in your kids' fishing pond?
Wow.
So I went over and watched him stock some 3-pound brook trout in
that's exciting.
in the pond. So you might want to bring your child up and do a little fishing.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, definitely.
Yeah. So let's get into it. This show is going to be a lot about the outdoor education center we're building. We have 90 acres of property, Sam does, in the city of Augusta. And over the last 2.5 years, we've put significant resources into developing the site. We've built a 600-foot road, 3 miles of trails with 11 boardwalks, a little 22 youth shooting range, a kids fishing pond that's 15 feet deep, and a little fire pit area. And we've been holding events there with the Scouts. Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts have both been using the site. We have some autistic kids that have been using it, some other kids with disabilities as well. The general public's been using it pretty extensively, too.
The pond is wheelchair accessible.
Yeah, everything is over there, including the outhouse that we have. We have a 1,000-gallon tank with a big outhouse there that is wheelchair accessible. So we make everything we do is wheelchair accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to get into it. We were approached last week by Pat Linehan. He's our first guest, and I'm just going to let you explain what you brought to us. And we were very excited that you've done it because it's given us an opportunity to raise some significant dollars we really need for the education center. So Pat, introduce yourself and what you're all about and why you're here today.
Welcome.
How much time do we have?
Well, I'll cut you off.
Good afternoon, Dave and Mike. Thank you for having me come in today. I'm here representing a fraternal benefit society, Modern Woodman of America. We're a financial services company. We're located throughout the United States. We help people plan for their financial future. We help, we offer products and services. and we have multiple agents all throughout the state of Maine. What makes us unique is we're fraternal. And by bylaw, we give back to the communities where our members live. We want to improve communities. Our name goes back. We have nothing to do with wood. But Modern Woodman was founded back in 1883 by someone who wanted to have a company that's modern, but also wanted to clear away financial uncertainty. Similar to what the woodsmen of yesteryear did, clearing away the forests to build villages so people could live in towns and flourish together. So to that end, our fraternal side, we sponsor activities, do matching funds, put on education programs every year in our chapters, which a chapter is just a geographic grouping of members in a certain area. So this year, with COVID-19, we really had to think a lot on what we did because we couldn't get together as a group the way we used to. So towards the end of the year, we still had some matching fund money left. And I've known Dave for a couple of years, and I've learned more about the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. I had no idea that they had a outdoor education program. No idea they had a trout pond until Dave took me over and showed it to me, and I was very impressed. And the capital area really has a wonderful diamond in the rough. And with this matching fund, I approached Dave. I said, what can we do? How can we use this to improve the Outdoor Education Center? And Dave and I spoke, and what we decided to do is end the year with a raffle. And that raffle, we will match up to $4,700.
That's awesome.
We'll support this activity with the match if the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine is able to raise that much money dedicated for the outdoor education program, and namely the trails and the new pond that they're looking to build for families.
By the way, let's clarify for the listeners. We have an existing pond. We're building a second pond. And the reason we're doing that is because one is limited to kids 16 and under. And we're finding more and more families, the parents don't know how to fish. So in order to meet the law, we're going to build the second pond, and then families with no experience can fish in the second pond and learn as well. So go ahead.
Absolutely. So we'll be sending postcards out to members. We have flyers printed out to put out. If people want to go to my Facebook page, Patrick Linehan, FIC, Financial Representative, Modern Woodman, or go to the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine webpage and take a look at how they can get involved. Buy tickets for the raffles. We have great raffle items, and we'll be able to help build this pond and develop this area, which is truly a gem for people to get out, enjoy the outdoors, get educated, and kind of improve their quality of life.
Yeah. Well, I know that on behalf of the organization and our board of directors, which Mike serves on, we'd like to thank you for coming to us. And, I believe that if you build it, they will come, especially if you build it safe, you're conscientious. We use all 4-H instructors when we have our programs. We'll talk some with the next guest about that. But we mean to do this right. And we greatly appreciate that. This gave us a spark, and I will tell you that I'm talking with some other folks about trying to match the money that you've committed. I now have a goal for $25,000, Pat, awesome. And that will show you that. I think a
spark gets a fire.
It
going
does,
there, yeah.
And a generous gesture like that can lead to great things, and I really do think we'll achieve that. Before it's done, and I'll talk a little bit more about our goals now. $25,000, and with your $4,700 and some of the other commitments that I'm following up on, we may be able to secure within the next 2 weeks about $15,000.
Absolutely, that's amazing. And some of the activities we've just promoted this year, or we participated in, a Camp Out Hunger Drive, where we're helping to remove food uncertainty. We've donated to food banks. We worked with a veterans program here, Pine Grove Veterans Programs, and we matched money for their golf tournament to help them put on activities for disabled veterans and first responders. So if you're interested in Modern Woodman or looking to see how to get involved, give me a call, 465-4800. I'm located right in Oakland, or call one of our other agents throughout the state. We'd be happy to help you.
Well, that's great. Bob Howe, who runs the Pine Grove programs, he started it and he's been running it with Andrea Howe, and they just do an amazing job. He's also a board member of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, and just saw him a few days ago. And I don't know how he and Andrea get so much done, but they almost every single day of the year they're taking veterans out into the woods and giving them an adventure.
It's an amazing program they run.
Yeah, it sure is. With that, I'd like to thank you again, Pat. We have another guest that'll be on in a moment. We have to take a quick break here, and then we'll get to our next guest. It's Christmas time, and with COVID, it's such a depressing period of time for us right now, and COVID is spiking, and it was just so good to be part of something
positive,
really positive, something good. These investments we're making now, we'll invest that over the next year. My goal is to have the education center done, the construction, by the end of this year. I think what we're going to raise from this spark of hope will get us there. And then it's just a matter of transitioning into a schedule of events there and putting as many kids through there as possible. We haven't had. I particularly like it because we have the ability to do an in-classroom education session and then go right out into the woods and learn firsthand. And the kids get to actually go fishing. They get to hike the trails, see wildlife. And so thank you for everything you've done. And let's hope that this leads to great things. So with
Absolutely.
that,
Sure it will.
One secondary thing that we didn't touch on that I think is really important. There's a lot of traffic that drives by Route 3, and most everybody I've spoke with when I've talked about what we're looking to do with the matching fund, they were surprised that was going on right under their nose, but also they were elated that it's open to the public and that they'll have a place to go where they can get outdoors. So thank you to the board for getting this whole thing going by getting the Outdoor Education Center up and running.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And we're going to take a break right now. We'll come back in just a minute and we'll get to our next guest. Again, thanks, Pat.
Conserving the Maine Outdoors. We'll be right back. Conserving the Maine Outdoors is back. Here's David Trahan.
Welcome back to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with David and Mike. I'm the good-looking one, him not so much.
He won't even sit to my left because he knows I'll smack him with the hook.
That shows a lot of intelligence, I think. With that, we've got a very serious segment coming up. I'm going to introduce Troy and let him introduce himself a little bit, but I met you not too long ago, Troy. I knew of you through other people, and everyone was telling me that you're really a stand-up kind of person, and on a mission to do some good in the world. And I know your story, but I'm going to let you tell it. Welcome to our show. This is a very serious issue, and I'm gonna let you just kind of introduce yourself and why you're here today.
Well, thanks, Dave, for having me. Certainly, most people recognize Megan Ripley's name. She was my daughter. She was out back of our house in December of 2006 with her brother, and an individual during muzzleloading season actually shot her, and she died from that incident. And certainly how our family handled all that has taken years to still get through. And but one thing that her 14-year-old brother was right there with her when she was shot, and he actually helped me try to keep her alive, giving her CPR. And the one thing that he wanted when we got to the criminal justice side of it, or the legal side of it with the court system, was that the individual that killed her, he wanted that person to speak and tell of what happened, because certainly that guy didn't get up, Timothy Bean didn't get up that morning and intend to go out and kill anybody's child. However, he just made error after error after error, which resulted in the death of Megan. And so Andy, that's her brother, said, I'd like him to try to help this never to happen again. And because of the disconnect between the courts and probation and the system that we have, that never took place. And Bean has never chosen to do it of his own accord. So that has kind of started me down a road of how do we prevent this kind of incident from happening again. And then, just 10 years later, Karen Retzel, a couple miles as a crow flies, identical situation. Somebody shooting at movement. And Megan and Karen and previous Karen Woods, they were all 3 people standing on their own property. So they weren't other hunters out in the woods hunting. It was private property owners on private property by people that were there. So, and then my thoughts of that are that Donald Rogerson, who killed Karen Woods, and Timothy Bean, who killed my daughter, and Robert Trundy, who killed Karen Retzel, the ages of these men indicates to me, and I think most reasonable people, that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, the consequences of a pattern of bad hunting behavior and bad decision making. And this, on these days, these fateful days, it just actually cost somebody else their life. So I've been more into the how do you prevent it, and that was a segue from the previous segment. Is it's education, and Sportsman Alliance of Maine has certainly made that one of their focuses, and so that's how I'm at.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll jump in here. It's for me, it's a strange situation because as a hunter myself, I've been hunting since I was a kid. I drove my parents crazy. I wanted to go hunting when I was 7 years old. It's just in my blood, and throughout my life, I've learned to recognize that when you're carrying a firearm, there's a series of decisions in your mind that you make. And at the end game is when you pull the trigger, there's a result and you can't take it back. And so as a hunter myself, it's taken a lifetime to learn all of the elements about being a responsible hunter, and mistakes are made, but the education component during my lifetime, it used to be that you didn't wear hunter orange. You could draw, everybody drove deer, you were in groups of people, and so much has changed over the years to reduce what was the number of accidental shootings from sometimes 20, 25, or 30 a year to really every other 3 or 4 or 5 years there'll be a shooting. And that's good news, but any shooting is bad news. And whether it's leads to a death or an accidental shooting, we should strive as hunters to eliminate every single situation. And every one of us as hunters is responsible for ourselves and what we do with our firearm. And I just say that because when I came to SAM some 10 years ago, Mike was on the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee as a chair, and we worked opposite party-wise, but we always worked well together. A lot of good, positive changes have been made, but you still need more changes. And you've been involved in several, but I want to talk about my role at SAM. I committed immediately, almost 10 years ago, to hunter education. We offered our facility to Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to hold their hunter safety classes. There were beginning problems with particularly hunter safety classes in school and the restrictions, and it was making it more difficult. And I wanted them to have the ability to hold any class they wanted. And we held as many as 20 hunter safety classes a year, and that means multiple nights for nothing. We didn't charge anything, and we don't charge for our classes. Then we blossomed out into holding some classes ourselves. I got several grants to do 4-H connected programs around archery, air gun, 22, and we've been blossoming out. We now have our own little shooting range, state-of-the-art shooting range, if I don't say so myself. I've built it with expertise from Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. We're continuing to build, but to some degree, we're on the same path. We want the same goal, which is to never have another shooting, an accidental shooting. So it's funny, here we are, and we came together not too long ago on legislation.
Right.
And I immediately, when I met you, I have a sense of people, and I knew I could trust you completely. And so we've been talking a lot. You've been working on a couple of initiatives. One's already passed around muzzleloaders and hunting, and then another that I'll let you talk about that would give the commissioner some power to maybe stop some other hunters who are acting irresponsibly. So go ahead, Troy, and talk about that a little bit.
Certainly, David. challenge is it would be easy for my family and the other two families and other people just to say the simple fail-safe answer is stop hunting or, make it all northern Maine hunting.
Right.
So,
right.
But to your point, and I alluded to it earlier, is that there's just no way that these three individuals woke up that day, and that was the first day they made a bad judgment. Mm-hmm. They all, Bean, in fact, had been charged with not wearing hunter orange previously, to my understanding. And so what happens is, and you alluded to it because you take ownership of what you're doing out there, is that license that IF&W issues for money is really, in my opinion, an agreement with the people of the state of Maine that these are the rules we say we're going to follow. This is because obviously 94% of the state's privately owned. So you got a pretty big chance that you're going to be on somebody else's property while you're doing it. So it's got to work in concert with each other. So, but what happens is that those that don't follow the rules the way that I think they should, the consequences are minimal, because when you're on somebody's property and the warden issues you a summons, then it goes over to the district attorney, who then has to decide, is this criminal? And usually the answer is no. It's, he was walked right past the no posted signs, but he didn't do anything criminal, and he didn't intend to do anything criminal while he was there. So there's no consequence for not owning up to the what I believe to be the agreement you've made with the people of Maine to use private property while you're hunting. So we've introduced some legislation, which you were a big part of, or Sam was support of, that gave the commissioner of IF&W kind of the same authority that the Marine.
Very similar. Yeah, that's right. Right now, the Commissioner of Marine Resources does have the authority to pull a person's license who's not acting responsibly, in their opinion. There are checks and balances in place.
Right.
It all has to be done with due process. But
yes,
extending this authority to the Commissioner is what we were working on together, and doing that in a way that the bad actors, if they refuse to become good actors, can have their license pulled.
Right.
That did pass the legislative committee, and unfortunately, it got caught up in the COVID process where the legislature ceased its work.
Yes.
And that had gone through the system with a lot of support from different areas and was on its path to passage. And I think it could be helpful, Troy, when somebody's on private property. I'll give you an example. My family has 240 acres in Waldoboro, and this young man was using our land with a four-wheeler, and he'd been told not to, because he was tearing it up. And I was down in the woods, and I heard the four-wheeler coming, and I stepped in the trail, and he nearly run me over. He did not want to stop, and I think he would have run me over had I not grabbed him by the collar and nearly taken him off the four-wheeler. Now, I said to the young man, we've told you repeatedly that you need to stop this activity, and you won't. And the words that I got from him were not very pleasant, but he said, stay here, I'll go get my brother, and we'll come back here and kick you, you know what.
Right.
And that leaves such a bad taste in an entire family. That leaves a bad taste. And when those individuals do that, they hurt that community for all of the responsible people.
Right.
And in this case, if you have a hunter that's on private property and they tell the landowner where to put it, the commissioner can come back and say, this is your one-time warning. Right. You either do what the landowner asks or I'll pull your license.
Right. And she had the ability to say, but in the meantime, we're going to have you take the hunter's ethics course again, or some kind of tangible, physical interaction with the rules, and without elevating the incident to a criminal activity. And part of it is education and understanding that there is going to be a consequence for poor behavior, because especially here in southern Maine, the acreage that's allowed to be hunted on is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every year because of incidents like this, and not just the catastrophic ones, but the tires, the trespassing, the houses being hit by bullets, which isn't every day and all the time, but one house in the neighborhood gets shot. And
again, it spreads to the entire neighborhood.
It's a cancer that needs to be dealt with in a and I think with bouncing it off as many players as what we did with the IF&W, Sam, a few others, that hey, this can work. This can be a controlled measure in the right direction.
Yeah, and I don't suspect it'll be used all the time.
No.
It'll be used on occasion when you've got a really bad actor.
Sure.
But I would stress to all those listeners out there that are concerned or might have concerns with this type of policy, like anything, the bad actors ruin it for all the good actors. And we have to police our own. And,
Right.
And the best thing to do is for the family to teach the responsible way. And then when we see something like this, to nip it in the bud. But when people grow up, they have their own minds and they act on their own. And there are going to be some bad actors out there. So there's going to be another tool, I think.
Right. And you were very, very steadfast and important in the due process part. This isn't homeowner X doesn't like hunter Y next door.
Yep.
That the whole due process portion with the warden, and then can it be appealed in the same as any other accusation, which I think is important to point out too.
That's right.
Your next door neighbor isn't going to stop you from hunting.
And if you've got an anti-hunting person
exactly.
in the community that wants to shut down hunting, they just can't come in and complain. There is a due process. Administrative Procedures Act is engaged. A person can appeal it just like they could any other. But it is that one intervention where the commissioner gets to warn them.
Right.
I can require you to take another ethics course.
Right.
If it gets worse and you don't stop it, I can pull your license. And people that love to hunt, they don't want their license taken
Definitely
away.
not.
And it'll act as an incentive.
Every commissioner that I've known, anyways, of IF&W is very reasonable people. They're not going to be going out on a whim taking people's licenses.
No, and
it's
they
going to
shouldn't
have to be serious accusations, and they're going to have to be substantiated for sure.
Right. But how many pictures every year do we see of the deer cams? Anybody know this jerk? Who is he?
That's right.
They've got a no trespassing sign in the background.
Exactly.
And then, no district attorney is going to say that's criminal trespass.
Yeah.
But we all know that it certainly violates what we profess to be.
Yeah, that's right.
So and dumping is a big landowner relation issue too.
It is.
For sure.
It is.
But I like how David said that when you pull the trigger, you can't take that back. My wife, you said that once before on a different show on Maine Calling. My wife picked up on that. She listened to that. She said, that is straight to the point, and it's exactly right. You need to identify your target, and hunters that don't do that, in my opinion, they're certainly not good hunters. They're certainly not the vast majority. 99.9% of hunters out there are excellent. They have sight target recognition, and they're trained well. They're probably, a lot of people grew up in hunting families and had plenty of time in the woods with, their fathers or mothers and brothers and sisters. But, the deer is just not worth it. Don't take the shot unless you know exactly what you're shooting.
Well, to David's point earlier, when I was a kid growing up, the hunter orange, I don't even remember if we had to have it, the mid 70s growing up there. But now, because of how things are progressing, smaller areas to hunt and so on, that sometimes rules that we put in place actually work to our opposite, in my opinion. Because if you look at Rogerson, Bean, and Trundy's statements that they made to the wardens, one of the first things they said was, I didn't see any orange. Not I saw a deer head so the hunter orange piece of it, though I think is a great program, actually in some cases, if you're letting other checks and balances fall by the wayside, in these three cases, they use it as an excuse of why they took the shot.
You're not hunting. You don't have to wear the orange.
You're not hunting for orange. You're hunting for exactly.
Let's get back to a good example of that. Maine has a 2-week southern Maine muzzleloader hunt. Northern Maine has a 1-week. So in northern Maine, everyone thinks that the muzzleloader season is over with after a week. Well, if they travel outside of that second district where they can only hunt a week down into the first, and they go out in the woods with a brown jacket on, then they're in the woods. And as a hunter, you nailed it. you have to know what you're shooting at. It doesn't make any difference if he's wearing brown from tip to tip.
Yeah.
You still got to know what you're shooting at. And if they're not wearing orange, it doesn't mean it's okay to shoot. So, and that's a good example of why. But that transitions back into muzzleloader hunting, because you were involved in another policy related to muzzleloader hunting, and I want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, yes, and to me, it's one of the challenges. Any time, as you know from your years in the legislature, and both of you do, is that nobody wants to give an inch because they're afraid they're going to lose the mile. And the word slippery slope, if I hear that again, I'm going to have a bad spell. But
I don't blame you.
But the irony of and when you're talking about hunting, you have to admit or acknowledge you're talking about some kind of gun or gun control or something to do, and that's a scary place to go sometimes. But in fact, my daughter was killed. To your point earlier, that December, she was killed in December because November was. I was like, okay, hunting season's over, so now the kids can venture out a little bit further around the house, kind of thing. And so the education of when the seasons are is different, but. She was killed with a muzzleloader, but I had one of the wardens came to me and said, hey, the guy that killed your daughter, Bean, can apply for a muzzleloader waiver. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's a felon. He has his hunting license revoked for life, I believe. Because a muzzleloader is not classified as a gun at federal level. Even though
that's correct,
the things are amazing now.
Yeah, the modern muzzleloader is really.
It's not Chamberlain with the the ball and the ram on Gettysburg. It's these things are extremely. Yeah, they are right. Yeah. So and this gave me hope. Some hope is that you can make a change that doesn't wipe. It's not a one size fits all. So with my local representative Skip Herrick at the time, introduced legislation that said if you have been convicted of your felony is violence against another person, or the domestic abuse, in my case homicide, then no, you don't get the opportunity to ask for the waiver from the Commissioner of Public Safety. Bad check felons, yes. Whatever else is a felony. White collar crime, yes. Okay, but if you have demonstrated poor judgment and behavior towards another human, then that's off the table.
Right.
And believe it or not, there were actually some, to my understanding, that had applied for that waiver and got it, and those will attrit once they're and it was only good for 5 years or 4 years. But once theirs expires, they can't reapply for it. So it was optimistic that there is, regardless of party affiliation or dynamics that goes on around us, that people. That took one meeting, by the way, the work session and.
I remember that Bill very well because I was involved on the other end of that, and at this point, you and I had not really had a chance to meet, and I think it was actually a good thing because the tragedy that occurred within your family. I just can't even imagine the kind of pain and suffering that your family has gone through related to that incident. And it was early. It was right after it happened or not too long after it happened. And I know you were working on some reverse posting issues at the time and have since, I think, abandoned that concept. But at the time, I didn't want to come in and say I have to speak against Troy Ripley's bill. I didn't want to come in and bring more pain onto your family. So I was working on the other end of that, and legislators were coming to me, what do you think of that legislation? And I remember saying, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and we really need to do that. So we were working at different ends again, just meeting in the middle somewhere.
Right.
And it's kind of ironic how we've kind of come to the same place, wanting the same thing, but just for different reasons. What happened with that, one of the things that I've noticed in my life is how times change. The safety measures in the woods have led to good things, but the technology has changed. We have crossbows and muzzleloaders. The muzzleloader I own is a Thompson centerfire with a loophole scope, and you put a target out at 125 yards, and I'll hit it every single time. They are a modern firearm, and we needed changes in the law to better reflect the fact that they are a modern single shot fire.
I hunt with a crossbow mostly, and that thing, I can hit a bullseye every single shot with that thing at up to even 40 yards out. If I was hunting, I probably would limit myself to 30 or so, but I can hit a bullseye with that thing put the target pretty much wherever you want.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit a bullseye with that thing. So,
Yeah. So the
even in archery, it's even with a compound bow. I mean, I had a compound for a long time. It had a sight on it. I could hit a bullseye with that almost every time.
Yeah. So the point is that all of these firearms, all of these the crossbows and whatnot, we need to act responsibly with every single one of them. One of the things we haven't talked about is Inland Fisheries and Wildlife is now, and we'll be having Judy in front of our board pretty quick to talk about an all-virtual hunter safety class. And I have mixed feelings about that, and Troy and I talked a little bit about it, where the COVID has forced a lot of this virtual, going from an actual in-classroom education course to all online, and we're still working through that. I don't know what we'll end up doing, but I have mixed feelings about that. There's just something about holding the firearm and being taught, showing that you can use it properly, identifying what's behind your target, something you're very passionate about. All of those things, I think, and some interaction with people with experience like yourself or your son or whomever comes in to say, I am the face of reality. This happened to my family.
I got to tell you, and you talked about it earlier, our school, I'm in SAD 17, Oxford Hills. It's 7 towns, 8 towns. And one of our elementary school, 6th grade, I believe, is Harrison, send the kids to the 4-H camp that Ron Fournier is up there.
Bryant Pond.
Bryant Pond. Yeah. And through just happenstance, we introduced ourselves to each other and told him who I was. And he said, hey, would you come speak? And so when I got to the landowner portion or hunter ethics portion, I got to speak. And so I told the story because one of the challenges is, in my opinion, is to not vilify Rogerson, Bean, and Trundy in a fashion that makes others think, well, that's not me. I would never do that. But you look at these guys on paper. They went up, go to work every day. They had houses. They had car payments, married, kids. So they're us in society. They weren't outlaws. So they're just normal people on paper that made extremely poor decisions. So anyway, I got to speak in front of this, I think it's 5th grade class. And so I'm telling the story that, this guy came, my daughter and her brother were out back. They had a 4-wheeler and their dog was with them. And then this guy came onto our property and he, didn't ask to be on my property. Didn't identify his target. Didn't do anything right and took a shot and my daughter was shot. And the consequences were, extremely poor, and it's been life changing in my family, and then this little girl, I'll never forget this. She was like, she raises her hand and she says, "Mr. Ripley, how's your daughter doing?" And I didn't know what to say. I just said, "Honey, she didn't make it. She died that day." And so now I'm thinking, I hope I didn't make this girl never want to hunt.
Right.
But I can tell you the impact of that was, you could hear a pin drop in there. And so I think there's the value of talking to people and interacting, that human aspect of it. I certainly hate to see that blanket given away. I mean, I can see virtual if we shouldn't make, in my opinion, hunter safety the reason, or the availability of hunter safety course, the reason somebody can't get their license and go.
I could see maybe a hybrid, where you do some of the coursework on a computer at home, and then you have to go the next day, or sometime in the future, to a real in-person for the firearm part of it, at the very least.
Yeah.
Well, there's also a difference in regions of the country, and I know that some states have gone to something like this and not seen a big change. But you've got to look deeper. I've always learned in my policy making that you have to look at other factors. For example, some states have pay to play, meaning there's 5,000 acres block land, 5,000 acres, and in total is 100,000 acres. You buy the rights to hunt in that, basically by yourself for a period of time. There's nobody else there. You have states with a lot of federal land where there's other restrictions, not a lot of hunters. In Maine, we have a lot of small landowners. I think the largest small landowner ratio-wise in the country, or one of them.
Yeah.
We have a lot of private landowners in small acreage. It's a lot of hunters in the woods, and there's more interactions between hunters. So you can't just put apples and apples.
No.
Right.
You got to know all the other factors, and that's one of the things I'm going to ask Judy. Is I want all the information. I want to know the makeup of the geography of the state, their accident rates before and after, how long it's been in place, what do they replace it with.
I would, and I like Judy because she's
She's sharp. She's
I
good.
started going down a road once. She goes, "Let me stop you right now. If you're asking this, I'm telling you, I'm not going to support it."
Yep.
And I was like, "Boy, I like her."
I do too. I like her for the same reason.
Yeah,
even if I don't agree with her.
yeah,
She's very, very honest.
She is.
Straight
She
up.
just said, "Let me stop you right now." I don't know if she gave me the hand, but I was like, "All right, let's move along." Let's no bones about it. So, but I would ask Judy, why don't you put that question out to all the private landowners that are going to, because we're in this. I mean, my family owns a couple 300 acres of land, and you're making a decision. I think one of the stakeholders should be do a survey because in my small town, as I started down this road, we took a survey that's just a straw poll at the June election that said, would you support an ordinance that required anyone to get your permission before they bring a deadly weapon onto your property or something to that effect? It was a straw poll. It was overwhelmingly yes. That you had to get permission first. So I don't think that just making a decision at IF&W level that we're just going to do this all virtually is something that should be done without getting a huge portion of the private sector to weigh in on that.
We just sent out a survey last week. I'm going to ask our members this question. But to Judy's defense, one of the things they want to do more of is mentoring programs where they do more hands-on stuff. I still believe for those that don't want to participate in the mentoring programs, you still have to have some hands-on. So knowing Judy, she's very reasonable. We've had a great relationship with this department and with this administration. So we'll come to a place that I hope we can all be comfortable with.
I wonder if they could do something like if you do the straight online, only online, that you get an apprentice hunting permit and you have to hunt with another hunter for a time period.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Or if you take the full course, then you're a real,
then you don't.
full-fledged hunter and you can go right out.
There's just something about...
It's like a driver's license and a permit, right?
Yeah. Isn't it funny that when you get your driver's license, which is a dangerous thing to do, is driving, probably more dangerous than hunting, I know it is, that you have to take that course and you have to prove that you're proficient with an automobile.
And if you don't, then they don't give you the license for another 6 months.
Well, a lot of people always try to correlate you served in the military, and so you must be gun qualified for life. But you got to bring another piece of it in, is that in my unit and doing what I did is we were on the range 3 days a week. Part two is everybody gets qualified every year to show proficiency in that weapon handling, and so you, in my opinion, you have to balance what you're saying of. You took a course once when you were 16 or 15, and now you're 45 or 55 and haven't hunted anywhere in between, or the dynamic. So the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't usually pass muster.
Or maybe if you wanted to do a refresher training, you could do it online or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of options out there. We could.
Well, there is, but I mean, some of my best times of my life prior to going into the military was hunting with my father, and one of the as you said, one would sit here, the other two would go up around, kind of a thing, and my father would be like, "Don't shoot your brother," don't pick that gun up until you know what's coming, and then they come up. Why did you shoot that buck? Well, I didn't dare to, I was so careful about what we were doing. So anything, and those are the best times with my father and my brother. He would sleep every year. My dad would take his gun away from him and wake him up or whatever. It was fun. So then that's that personal communication and the interaction with each other. And I don't think you can get all that online. And you'll at those meetings and stuff, the longer you're there, the bigger the lie gets about how the buck was, and then there's fishing stories, and it is a community kind of a thing, and I don't know. From what I've heard about the simple answer, it's all virtual because I'm on the school board and I know how that's working with classes.
It's not very good, is it?
And there's certainly some challenges. Some people really need that interaction.
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, the virtual learning, if it's backed up by the experience from the parents, it can be fine.
Yeah.
Which is the same kind of what we're talking about.
That's right.
If you have a portion of it, anyways, could be virtual. But it's really the important part is getting together with the people that know what's going on, that are experienced in that.
I want to do a shout out. We're going to have to take a break here and then finish up here in a minute. I want to do a shout out to all those parents out there, all the shooting instructors from the NRA, from 4-H, all the people who volunteer their time at the Fish and Game Clubs to teach. I think that they're the unsung heroes here, that we have one of the greatest networks in the country, I believe, and it's one reason why I think the firearm ownership in Maine is so responsible, is all of those instructors and the moms and dads who stress that kind of safety in the home, in the woods. Thank you to all of you that do that work, because our communities are safer because of it. Your kids are safer because of it. The next generation is safer because of it. So shout out to you. Good job. With that, we're going to have to take a quick break and see how much time we have left. And I want to talk a little bit about legislation. So thank you, and thank you, Troy, for coming in and
so much
sharing a very, very
it.
sad story and tragic story about your family. So hopefully we can learn something from it. Thank you.
Conserving the Maine Outdoors will be right back. Conserving the Maine Outdoors is back. Here's David Trahan.
Welcome back to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with David and Mike. Well, that was a very, very tough, but I think needed interview with Troy Ripley. For those that are just coming in to listen, we just did an interview with Troy Ripley. He tragically lost his daughter in a hunting accident, and we had a nice discussion about some things positive things that have changed, and maybe help prevent a tragedy like that in the future. It was tough. So, Mike, I did in this segment, I wanted to talk about a couple of related bills that we've introduced, not really directly connected to this incident, but a couple of bills that we'll be introducing. We have several, and we can talk about them in a future show, but we have a couple of bills. One of them passed last legislative session. Unfortunately, we lost it in the shuffle of the COVID shutdown, and it never did finally get funded. And it was to create a sales tax exemption for gun safes, lock boxes, and other firearm safety devices. That passed unanimously. In combination with the discounts we offer our members, it would have led to $300, $400, $500 sometimes incentives for people to upgrade their gun safes and other safety
storage
devices. Storage type. Why that's important is one of the ways that criminals get guns is to break in and steal your guns, and locking them up in a safe makes it more difficult. And,
definitely.
Especially with kids in the household too.
Of course, the other issue, is that kids get a hold of the firearms, and that unfortunately also happens usually once, sometimes twice or three times a year. Is there's accidental discharge, usually by children, which ends up in a fatality. So
that's again very, very tragic and unavoidable. So whatever we can do to incentivize, particularly. Maybe even lower income folks, we might even look at a little grant that the state could provide. That
was our initial idea, was to provide grants. We thought of, the board of directors thought of a $250 grant
to match.
Or a tax credit.
Tax credit, correct.
Yeah, that's what we thought of. And then you could get basically a free safe at Cabela's if you're a member, with the discount and the $250 credit.
Right. So we'll keep working on that. I think it's a good idea. I know it is, because some of the groups we traditionally are on opposite sides of.
And it passed.
It did pass with support of some of the gun control groups, which was a surprise. A pleasant surprise, and I think a good thing. So with that, we've reintroduced that bill. Patrick Corey put it in for us again, Representative Corey. We'll see how it goes. A second bill that we're working on. Matter of fact, I have a Zoom call in about 25 minutes, so I've got to get out of here in a few minutes with Maine Revenue Services. There was a ruling recently that ammunition and other components in ammunition, even though it's going through a catalog and it's through the mail, you can purchase it out of state and it comes into the state, should have been collecting sales tax. And Maine Revenue Services has cited some of these companies for not collecting the sales tax, and they're going to fine them, and they have to pay back taxes with interest and that sort of thing. So it's kind of blown up into this issue of that we have to resolve. And I suggested to Senator Davis that perhaps we could solve a couple of problems if we fix this. If we could suspend those fines and get these people to comply and pay the sales tax just like a shop here in Maine would do, charge the sales tax, what he thought of taking a portion of that and establishing a grant program for shooting ranges around the state to improve safety, as well as sound suppression so they can be better neighbors, and those types of improvements to ranges. We have 70 fish and game clubs we partner with. Many of them have shooting ranges, and there are conflicts constantly going on with claims of bullets leaving the range and noise. And so we're going to meet with Maine Revenue Services to see if there's a way we can develop a grant program to make those types of improvements at shooting ranges around the state. I think there's general support. I've already spoken with Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and they're talking about it internally. They do a grant program now, but with federal money. But unfortunately, with federal money comes a whole bunch of strings. And for example, in the hunter safety classes, the Pittman-Robertson dollars can't be used for handgun training. So the most dangerous firearm, as far as accidents, you can't even train young people how to handle them properly. So there's those types of conflicts in federal regulations that we want to bypass. We want the ability for, say, a town like Augusta that's trying to develop an ordinance to deal with noise, to be able to go to IF&W, using your experts, how can we improve this range noise and safety, and then have a funding source to pay for some of it. There's conflicts going on all over our state with shooting ranges, but I would remind our listeners, shooting range is the safest place to shoot. If you're not at a range, you're probably in somebody's backyard shooting with no safety measures in place. Yeah. They're designed for that very reason, and most of them use instructors trained instructors when you're shooting. So you shut a shooting range down for noise?
Yeah, you mean a gravel pit, the local gravel pit.
Troy, you're exactly right. You've got 250 people in a gravel pit.
Right.
Shooting randomly the way they want without any oversight. So we've got to do something to preserve these safe shooting areas. And I think this is the transition we need, is we need a funding source to make improvements. Some of these little clubs, they have bake sales. They have $20 dues a year paid for all of this work that's being done. The other thing I suggested, and I didn't get much response from the city of Augusta, was you guys dig a lot of dirt in the run of a year. Maybe some of that dirt should end up in a berm at some of these shooting ranges you're concerned about. So I'm going to try to foster some relationships between municipalities and the ranges to beef up berms and that sort of thing.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, they have the dirt, they have the trucks. They end up dumping it in somebody's backyard and getting no compensation for it. Perhaps they should be using it to reinforce some of the berms. So we're going to really tackle that issue and get right into it, and hopefully we can solve a couple of problems.
Great.
Deal with the ammo sales tax issue, as well as get a grant program started for ranges. So anybody else have jump in here with a question? No? All right. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left. We do have some other legislation coming. There's been an effort underway recently to change the Land for Maine's Future program in ways that our board does not support. I do not personally support. We've been a big player in developing that program. We're going to submit our own.
I think Sportsman's Alliance of Maine developed that program.
So for those, I don't want to call them fringe, but for those organizations out there that call themselves conservation organizations, we're not going to agree to exclude some people. We're not going to change that program in a significant way. Maine people support it. It's been very popular. We're submitting our own bond, we're only going to support the language in the bond that we submit.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is there was an effort by some people, not many, to try to remove some of the language around protecting specifically deer wintering areas and things like that.
Yeah.
But
that's not coming out, guys. Not with our support, and we certainly would fight that.
And it's funny too, because it overlaps with some of the issues that they want to talk about too. A mature stand of wood that protects wildlife. It should be the foundation of conservation for some of these groups, but they made a run at pulling that language out, and it's not going to happen. So with that, the sheriff is over here, and he's pointing his finger at me, and that usually means I have 1 minute left. Exactly.
Well, we have 1 minute left, I should say. You want to wrap this up, Mike?
Yeah, well, The production today was a production of the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine. We want to thank our guests for coming in today. It was an incredibly important and very good show, and we always run out of time too fast, I find. When we first started, it was like, what are we going to talk about for an hour? Now it's like we run out of time every time, but thanks for joining us. We do have some great sponsors. Poland Springs is a great
LL Bean,
Kittery Trading Post, Waste Management, Cabela's, Hamlin Marine is incredibly generous, so visit those folks too.
You've been listening to Conserving the Maine Outdoors with David Trahan and Mike Shaw on Legacy 1160 WSKW. Join the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine by going to sportsmansallianceofmaine.org and like us on Facebook.